So I welcome everyone to this debate, the proposition team, which is Vanini Casalano, one, and the opposition team, Catarina Messina. And the topic that we will debate now is how to ban the consumption of animal meat. And I am the chair judge, Sara Giordani, and these are my colleagues, Casa and Gamba. And without any further ado, I leave the floor to the first speaker of the proposition team. Thank you.
Well, good afternoon everybody. I'm glad to be here today to discuss this topic, but first let me start by introducing myself and my house. We are the Girls' Voices team that includes me, Giovanna De Marco, as the first speaker, Giulia Fedele as the second, and Giulia Wiggett as the third. Today we have the honor to debate that this house would ban the consumption of animal meat. But first let me start by giving proper definition. For example, what does the verb ban mean? According to all English dictionaries, to ban something means to say officially prohibit, so to ban, to eliminate something. And consumption, furthermore, is the act of using or drinking or eating something. And the term meat originates from the term, or the English term mete, which means food in general. Well, this house supports the motion. We are the proposition house and proposes legislation for the purpose of gradually banning the consumption of animal meat by heavily taxing either producers or consumers and by increasing more and more the availability of plant-based foods until they completely replace meat. Well, we know well that the meat debate is both complicated and divisive. But nutrition and nutrition experts have sent mixed messages for years, but there are reasons to eat meat and to avoid it. But few people really knows what meat does for us and how it affects the environment and our planet. Some people consider meat to be the fantastic source of nutrients, while others argues that it's harmful to human health. Some sources say meat is environmentally friendly, and others say that meat production contributes to deforestation and to other environmental damages. Well, this house wants to untangle the meat debate from an health, ethical, and environmental-based perspective and uncover the cons of eating meat. This house is in favor of the claim for three main reasons. Firstly, there are several health concerns linked to meat consumption. Secondly, it is unsustainable as it has a huge impact on the environment. And thirdly, it is cruel and unethical. I'll start to demonstrate how eating meat is harmful for health, while the second speaker, Giulia Fedele, will discuss about the other 2 points. Recent evidence shows from USA and European studies and from epidemiological studies indicates that the long-term consumption of increasing the amounts of red meat and the processed meat is associated with a risk of total mortality, for example, cardiovascular disease, or such as heart attacks, a higher risk of ischemic heart disease, or breast cancer, limbs cancers, and also the type 2 diabetes for both men and women. The reasons for these health implications are related to the amount of fats, the amount of cholesterol that are contained, and the high sodium contents that are contained in meat. Decades of scientific studies have linked dietary cholesterol to cardiovascular disease. Let's think about what happens in America, in which every day dies 2,200 Americans because of cardiovascular disease. Also, researches published by American Journal of Clinical Nutrition suggest eating meat can increase the risk of cardiovascular disease. This is due to the cholesterol amount that is contained in meat and causes blockages in blood vessels. And also, the risk eating meat causes the risk of an ischemic stroke by 47%. Furthermore, it can increase also the developing Alzheimer's disease. By contrast, Dr. Simon Ridley, that is the director of Alzheimer's research, said that if we eat something about fruits, vegetables, or nuts, it can reduce the risk about having developing Alzheimer's. There are other... Yes, sure.
You are talking about the bad effects of meat, but other studies have pointed out that especially during infancy, meat is useful for your diet. So why would we ban meat if there are occasions where it is understandable and it is understood that it is helpful?
Sure, but we can replace meat by other nutrients. Because, for example, tofu is a very important food in which contains very similar proteins and vitamins that are similar to meat. So I think that I lost your question and I continue my speech. We also need to consider that there is a close correlation between meat consumption and the increase in cancer risks. And the World Cancer Research likewise reports there is evidence that red and processed meat are both causes of colorectal cancer and breast cancer. There is a reason for this, because first, meat is devoid of fibers and other nutrients that have a protective effect against cancers, but secondly, meat contains animal protein, saturated fat, and in some cases carcinogenic compounds that such as heterocyclic amines and polycyclic aromatic hydrocarbons that are very dangerous for us. Saturated fat have been linked to breast cancers, and additionally, another important issue to consider is the development of two types of diabetes. That is an illness that can that can cause debilitating health problems such as saturated fat and cholesterol. And for example, also we have to consider the danger that are linked to anticorps and antibodies that are eaten by animals, or pesticides that are eaten by them, or also that we have to consider the hormones that are given to animals to make them fatter and bigger that we eat when we eat them. Well. Another important issue to consider is the weight. The consumption of meat can cause weight gain either, because meat is in fact known to have high amount of calories, and which means that you will gain some weight from eating meat. In particular, if you have a sedentary life, because the stored energy that is contained in meat isn't spent anymore. Well, to sum up, considering all the health damages of eating meat, this house is firmly convinced that the production and the consumption of meat must be governed and specifically prohibited, as I have just explained, because eating meat can only create dangers for our health, and not anymore, and it can give any other good effects on our body. So that was all. Thank you for the attention.
So I thank the first speaker of the opposition team, and I'll leave the floor to the first speaker of the opposition team.
I will start in 3, 2, 1. Good morning, everyone. My name is Luca Santamaria. I'm the first speaker of the House against the motion. Before starting, I'd like to rebut some of the things that the other House has said. First of all, the fact that meat has only bad effects on our health. That is untrue. As I said as a question before, meat is helpful during infancy to reduce hemoglobin concentration, and thus it is part of an healthy diet, which surely it's odd to ban only because there are other people who maybe don't share the same conviction, have other ethical concerns, or think that for other parts of your life it is not healthy. Meat is healthy during infancy. Moreover, they cited the fact that meat could be substituted, but there are various difficulties for various people regarding allergies or things like that that could stop you or at least make more difficult for you to ensure a sufficiently nutrient diet based on vegetables. Moreover, the American Association of Nutritionists suggests for teenagers to consult an expert regarding diets. And obviously, all of these requirements for a ban would mean that for a lot of people who maybe live in isolated areas where there is not a lot of possibilities to choose foods, or where simply there are not enough experts, trying to ensure the plant-based diet would be more costly and possibly not affordable for a lot of people. There are good parts of our population, according to the US Ministry of Agriculture, lives in food deserts, so this could be a problem also. Now, I'd like to move on to the general line of my team. First of all, I will be talking about the general disadvantages that our world will have from a ban, the terrible consequences it will have in our world, and how it will violate individual freedom and why it is important. Then the second speaker is going to talk about terrible effects that it will have on poorer countries and how difficult it will be to substitute meat, and especially how difficult will it be to move on the economics point of view from meat. Okay. Okay. First of all, when we think about imposing a ban worldwide, we have to consider the possible consequences of the proposition of a ban. Like, for example, not everywhere a plant-based diet is possible. There are 1/3 of our planet is composed of arid or semi-arid regions, according to the FAO, according to the FAO, and those regions cannot grow agricultural or plant-based foods. They usually are mainly used for animals or livestock. An example is when we tried to convert the Sahel, a fertile region in the south of Sahara, from producing livestock to producing plant-based food. The result was a reduction in productivity, was the start of desertification in some of the regions where this experiment was done, and in general this has shown us that, obviously, a ban on meat for some regions will be a disaster. Moreover, it is important, as I said before, the fact that we choose to abandon meat. This should not be an imposition, because if the people think of it as an imposition from high above them, an imposition which they cannot understand, there will probably be social unrest. People would simply not care for what we are, our measures regarding meat. An example could be the Mongols and Berbers population, which both have as tradition. They live a life that is nomadic. They are not linked to a certain city or a certain region, and for them, being able to harvest meat from livestock is vital. Taking from them this possibility would mean that we will have to change their entire culture. And obviously, how can we think that people that are obliged to change their way of living without possibly understanding or approving our measures, how can we think that those people will support us? How can we think that we will be able to ensure a ban of meat on those people? This will surely create high social unrest and great problems.
Don't you think that these populations that you spoke about, can't they just purchase different foods from other countries if they don't have it in theirs?
Well, as I said before, both the Berbers and Mongols are nomadic populations. So the idea of importing something is much more difficult. They don't have supermarkets where they can go and buy food. They grow their food and then they slaughter the animals and eat meat. They don't have the local supermarket where they can go and they can buy coffee from Peru or things like that. It's simply not an option for them. I think I answered your question. And now, we also have to consider that it's not only a ban what will help us to eventually phase out the problems of meat. There are other countries which have been successful in reducing the consumption of meat without imposing a ban. For example, we have Uruguay, Germany, Japan. All of them did not enact a total ban on meat, but still they were able to reduce the consume of meat. Also, another terrible effect regarding meat, regarding the absence of the global ban on meat, is that thousands, if not millions of workers will be without a job. They will need to undergo probably years of retraining, which will be costly. We don't know if they will be able to afford it, because the meat industry is not usually the best paying one, and those same workers would need to help their families through those periods, as well as objective difficulties. Some people will have to emigrate to leave their country, because I said before, entire enormous regions such as the Sahel are not fit for plant-based food. And what other choice do they have if not to abandon their place where they have lived all their lives to go somewhere else to try to find a new job, to find a new activity, a new way to sustain themselves? Obviously, for them, this ban would be disastrous. We cannot realistically imagine that those people will be able to enact such a change. It is simply wishful thinking. It's not something realistic. Also, as I said before, obviously meat is important for our diets. Banning it is not helpful. To conclude, banning meat would mean that we, or parts of our population, will be living with a diet which is unhealthy, which is not approved by the experts. Moreover, we will be facing important economical struggles and challenges to permit a ban. A lot of people will be left behind. We do not think that is the right way forward. We need to care for those people. We need to find less intrusive ways to phase out the problems regarding meat. We should try to find something else, because this will create so much more problems. It will simply make our world a worse one instead of a better one. Thank you. I've ended my speech.
I thank the first speaker of the position team, and if the judges are ready, I leave the floor to the second speaker of the position team.
Good afternoon, everybody. I'm Puglia, the second speaker of the proposition team. Before I start with the other two argumentation that brought up in my house, I'd like to say that the proposition team didn't provide any definition of this topic, so we cannot understand what's truly going on with this motion. Now, let me move on to the other two arguments. As Giovanna has already explained, producing and consuming meat provokes great disadvantages for our health, but beside all this, there are also two great problems. The first one has to do with the environmental impact that livestock have on the environment. The second one is of an ethical nature. I'd like to say that livestock production accounts for roughly 14.5% of all global greenhouse emissions. This is very problematic because, as we know, they emit a lot of it, and this can be very dangerous for health, but also for the environment. I would also have to underline that the entire system of food production causes 17.3 billion metric tons of greenhouse gases a year, accelerating the process of global warming. This means that the link between livestock production and climate change is very strong, and in fact, meat production and consumption is actually killing our planet. In addition, grazing animals requires a lot of land, which is often cleared through deforestation. And when forests are bulldozed and those areas that were firstly covered by savanna and rainforest are now marked by industrial industries, and those people who used to live there are exposed to great dangers because of the use of pesticides. Pesticides are also a great problem that accelerates global warming. Scientists also believe that we should avoid eating meat, and so we should start to change our diet if we really care about the environment and consider the profound impact that livestock production has on the environment, while we're still carrying on consuming meat when we know that the environment issue is a very problematic thing nowadays. As the agenda, the 2030 agenda has suggested, we as a new generation should have a moral obligation on mitigating climate change if we truly care about the future of a new generation. The second thing I'd like to say it has to do with the way animals are treated. We know that 99% of animals that are used for meat production have to endure a life of terror and fear. In fact, when they grow in metal cages, windowless and very dirty, and so they have to live in terrible sanitary conditions. And this is not only harmful for them, but also for us consumers, because we will eat all the toxins that have already eaten. But what's worse is what happens to them once they reach slaughterhouses. In fact, they have their throats slit, or they are conscious while they're plunged into scalding hot water of the ferretering or the skinning tents.
Yes. If we ban meat, what do you think will happen to the animals that are currently being used for meat production?
Well, I don't think that's a true problem, because those animals could be set free in nature and keep living as animals that are currently living on an organic farm when they receive all the care that they actually need. I think I've answered to your question. Okay, as I was saying, animals are treated very badly in those slaughterhouses, and what's bad is that often those workers use antibiotics to make them resistant in those bad situations, or to allow them to produce more eggs or meat than they naturally would. For example, some chicken grow so unnaturally large that their legs cannot sustain the weight of their body, and so they die of dehydration or starvation. And what about those wet markets in Asian countries, such as in Indonesia or in Thailand, where there's no regard for the health of animals? In fact, PETA, that are investigators that care about the way animals are treated, were shocked to see, while they were visiting one of these wet markets, that animals were stuck together with open wounds, or to see their bodily fluids covering tiles and floors. What we firmly believe is that animals have rights, and that they are complex just like humans are. In fact, scientists are finding evidences of this very often, and that means that since animals are similar to us, they can experience pain just like we do, and we do not have any right to inflict voluntary pain in those innocent creature. And that's also to add the fact that the situation is very similar for those animals who live in organic farms, because sometimes it's not always, but sometimes it happens that some animals have to endure the same terrible treatment that even animals in factory farms have to endure. For example, they are defeated, dehorned or castrated without painkillers, or while they are still conscious. The question is that many people do not believe that animals have rights, and they think that if animals eat other animals to survive, we could do the same. But it's a fundamental difference, because our need to eat animal is a trivial need. That means that we do not depend on animal meat in order to survive. We can eat vegetables or fruit, while fish, but some animals will die if they do not eat meat, and because of this, their interest is classed as basic, and if they cannot eat their basic food, all their other interests will be frustrated, and so they will die. So my house is fully convinced that we cannot be animal lovers if we pay for the torture, abuse and murders. That's why we should ban the production, consumption, so use of meat by law. I hope that with all the arguments that my house has given, for example, the health issue brought by Giovanna and the attitude that I have explained, you will start to see this issue in a different view, and that you should start to change your attitude towards the way we eat. We can start eating plant-based food, for example, that are rich in fiber, vitamins and proteins that allow us to stay healthy and to do and to live a normal life even without harming innocent creatures just like animals. That was all. Thank you for listening.
I thank the second speaker of the proposition house, and when the judges are ready. I can leave the floor to the second speaker of the proposition.
So starting in 3, 2, 1. Good morning to everyone. I'm Lucia Strancone and I'm the second speaker of the House against the motion. However, before speaking about our main points and arguments, I would like to add some critical comments and to what they have said until now and rebut the other House's allegation. We firmly believe that what they asserted, especially what the second speaker of the pro-house just said, is absolutely inconceivable for several reasons. Starting with one of their main points, namely the environmental impact. So they stated that we eating animals also assume unhealthy substances such as chemical stuff, and but replacing meat with a plant-based diet, we would also assume such chemical stuff as to help plants grow more swiftly and therefore faster. They also use chemical substances. In addition, they would eliminate the production of meat consumption, the production of meat, because of this so-called pollution. Well, actually, reducing plants, so letting them grow and using these chemical agents also generate pollution, a higher and more present pollution of the ground, and therefore you're not solving the problem at all, because producing vegetables, nuts is not pollution free, the second speaker also stated that producing meat, so having animal farms would require a lot of land. But as you should replace those animal farms with crops, etc., you would also require a lot of space that would be filled with these crops, with these fields, etc. So I don't really get your point. I will now be talking about how it's just not feasible to indiscriminately ban meat consumption from our diets, as the first speaker of our house said, without having terrible consequences on poor countries and their economy. Not all people can afford to substitute meat with other, sometimes less accessible and more expensive food that has the same nutrients that we would then need, whereas they have stated. The idea of imposing a ban on meat is surely tempting when giving a first glance at the data of this industry, but a closer look shows us that our world is not as simple as many people may think, also such so apparently good solution is marred in difficulties. The problem with promoting global vegetarianism is that the wealthy are free to assume that their their ability to eat no meat directly transfers to the rest of the population. This is not the case, and our house will explain you why. Reducing meat consumption would definitely help the environment, but not with an imposition. That's not how a well-functioning society does work. The reduction has to be an individual choice based on each person's needs, values and possibilities. The problem is that the solution of banning meat globally given by the pro-house is way too extreme and simplistic, it wouldn't effectively address the problem, solve the problem. A one-size-fits-all solution to the climate crisis through our diets could be unhelpful, as how we eat affects our world depending on where we eat and how our food is actually sourced. There are different ways to obtain meat, as you of course know, and not all of them share the same impact on our world. For example, animals that locals raise for their own... Yeah, of course.
Don't you think that eating meat is unethical because many animals are killed cruelly?
So eating meat isn't unethical because we as humans have done it since the first ages. But if I see your point, so if I follow your logic, meaning you believe that eating meat is unethical because of cruelty, well, this is a problem of certain animal farms, and it can just be solved by increasing the controls. Returning back to my speech, it is critical to recognize that different countries also have different priorities and are at different stages of development, meaning there are different imperatives these countries should face. And recent researchers conducted at the Harvard School for Public Health found that eating a healthy diet rich in fruits, vegetables and nuts costs us way more than eating primarily processed foods and meats. The researchers note that this added cost isn't arbitrary, but it is a result of food policies that have focused on inexpensive, high-volume food production and on a national infrastructure that favors sales of highly processed food products for maximal industry profit. The problem isn't only that healthy food costs more, it is also that healthy food is much more difficult to acquire, and some studies conducted in the US by the local Ministry of Agriculture estimates that 23.5 million people live in so-called food deserts, which are described as a city or urban tract far more than a mile from a grocery store, and these zones have usually very limited choice regarding what to eat, and they cannot fit in every so arbitrary ban. So is it right for us to cut away millions of people from the food they desperately need, all the while claiming for the moral high ground to radically change cultures on a whim, because let's say it is a whim, for our ethical needs without thinking or caring for those who would take the greatest brunt, so those poor countries. And our house, of course, totally disagrees, and we think that the way forward requires changes, but not a such radical one, just a gradual change and the general limitation, not a ban on the consumption of meat, as to be more affordable on the global economy and on the shoulders of those who cannot afford these payments. Are you finished?
So I thank the second speaker of the opposition team, and I leave the floor to the third speaker of the opposition team. Whenever you're ready.
Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Julia Wiggett, and I will be acting as third speaker for the proposition team. I believe that up to now we have listened to very valuable arguments and very interesting arguments as well, both from the opposition team and, of course, from my own team as well. So I believe my object up to this point is to try and reach a conclusion between these two very different ideas of the world and, of course, of this motion. So I'll start about talking about the health issue. So, of course, you have said that eating an exclusively plant-based diet is highly unhealthy. Well, I must disagree. To be highly healthy, a plant-based diet must be reviewed and organised by a very experienced doctor or nutritionist who knows how to do his job and who knows what foods are good and what foods are bad. Of course, eating a plant-based diet is very healthy, and I believe we all know the reasons, because it is very popular, especially in those last years. And also my two colleagues here have eminently discussed the reasons of why would make such a choice, and we want to propose it, of course. So, plenty of researchers around the world, especially in American universities, have proved that eating, for example, red meat is not very good, not very healthy for one's body, because it increases the risk of having cancer at a second stage of your life. And around, I'd say, 7 million of death are caused, of course, not by meat directly, but indirectly, because, of course, meat causes a lot of diseases, and for this reason we believe we should ban it, or we should at least try and reduce it as much as possible, because meat is everything but healthy. Yes.
You say the damages that meat does through illnesses, but wouldn't the damages coming from a ban, especially for the poorer people, be an even greater damage and problem for people, for the world?
Well, in a way, what I can say is, of course, the people who work for meat industries will be without a job if we were to completely ban meat. But of course, there are plenty of ways to work with animals. For example, we can still get milk and eggs off them. We are just against meat because meat is unethical. We are killing another animal to gain its meat and to eat it, and this is highly unethical. We have not the right to kill another being, another living being in this world, because everyone here deserves a shot at life, and we are absolutely no one to do so. Another issue I'd like to talk about that you presented is it has to do with the environment. So I want to say that it's not like you say. In other words, the meat industry is highly polluting. You said even to the same levels as producing electricity or other kinds of industry, but the point is that, of course, we do need electricity and water, but meat industry is not essential. We can do without meat, but of course we can't do without other polluting problems, without other polluting industries. So my point is, yes, it is polluting, but you know, we can do without. There is no need for meat industry. For example, another point which has drawn our attention is the deforestation caused by industry, caused by these industries. So what happens is, especially in the Amazons, and we know that the Amazons are like the lungs of our globe, and it is absolutely a tragedy what is happening. So when promoting animal meat, we are basically promoting deforestation in the Amazon, because what they do is completely burn or destroy the trees in order to make room also for what is called and what has become fashionable in a way, which is free-range farming, which is basically some kind of illusion, because we think that animals live in a more human way, since there are no cages and they are free to roam in the grass and in the woods, and you know, this is not actually the case, because they are still animals that we are going to eat at one point, and we are going to take their life away. And this obviously is very related to my earlier point, which is the ethical point that we have eminently discussed. And another food that I believe can substitute meat even better than lentils or beans or soy or chia beans is tofu. Well, tofu isn't as fashionable here in Europe as it is, for example, in America or in India and in the Middle East. But of course it is very healthy, and it has many vitamins, and it is ideal, in our opinion, to substitute meat. So I hope I have given you something to think about today, and I hope my speech has been enlightening and that you have learned something new. And thank you for your attention. My speech is now over.
Can I start?
Just this moment, please. Okay. So I thank the third speaker of the opposition team, and I leave the floor to the third speaker of the opposition house.
Okay, I will start in 3, 2, 1. Hello everyone, my name is Alicia Metin-Livia, and I'm the third speaker of the House against the motion. Now, I would like to address some of the points made by the proposing House. one of the main points that they made was about the environment. Now, according to a study from Food and Agriculture Organization, emissions due to agriculture, well, most of them do come from meat. 13 of them come from synthetic fertilizers, 10% of them from rice cultivation, 4% of them from crop residue. So this shows us that the problem of the agricultural industry isn't just about meat. Plant-based foods do pollute the planet as well. And if we stopped producing meat and started producing more plant-based food, the emissions from the plant-based foods would go up. So I believe that you are nitpicking here because plant-based food, if you're talking about pollution, plant-based food is a problem as well. Because the problem isn't meat itself, meat production itself, it's the whole agricultural industry. So we believe that, having taken this into consideration, if we were to consider the problem of the environment, banning meat isn't actually the answer, but rather we need to change, improve and optimize agriculture. Now, another point that the proposing house extensively talked about was the conditions of animals that are produced from meat. Yes. So, if we implemented a meat ban, these animals, what would happen to them? We can't. When asked the question, the proposing house answered that we could release them, but that's not feasible because, first of all, if we, it seems that you really care about the well-being of these animals, but these animals are used to being domesticated, are used to being fed by humans, and they can't survive on their own. They will, most of them will simply die. And, yes.
The fact that animals are domesticated by humans means that they can also be killed by humans.
The question isn't really clear to me, but I mean...
Sorry, the fact that humans have the right to domesticate animals does also give them the right to kill them.
If we need them for nutrition, yes, but they can be treated. There are ways to treat them properly until their death, and then we can consume them for food. I don't believe that's unethical. Anyways, not only would they die if we release them into the wild, but some of them might even survive. But if they do survive, that will also become a problem. For example, feral pigs are a problem. Feral means that an animal that used to be domesticated and that's now living in the wild. So if, for example, pigs that were released from animal farms start living in the wild, and if we stopped meat consumption, many animals might be released from these animal farms. So if we took feral pigs, for example, they are a growing problem in the United States, and an estimated population of 6 million feral pigs causes billions of dollars in damage on property and in agriculture every year. And this is a problem now that meat hasn't been banned. So if we banned meat and released these animals, which is a solution proposed by the proposing house, then this problem of feral animals destroying property would only grow. Now, another thing that I would like to point out that didn't sit right with me is that when talking about the treatment of animals, the mistreatment of animals, the proposing house cited PETA, and PETA is proven to be a biased source who has shown that they don't really care for animals, so it doesn't sit right with me that they talked about animal rights by citing a source that doesn't really do what it says it does. Now, I would like to recap our team line. So, some of the points that we touched on were freedom of choice. as we know, man's a being of free will, and especially now in now that we live in a democratic society, we can't expect to dictate people on something as important and as vital as what they can or they can't eat. If we dictated them, we would deprive them of their freedom. Now, it's true that excessive consumption of meat causes problems, but anything in excess causes problems. And people can be dictated to abstain themselves from eating it. Instead, what we believe is that they should be made aware of the adverse effect of excessive consumption of meat on their health. Because we have to remember that we've been farming and eating livestock for around 10,000 years. We can't just change our diet from one day to another by implementing a meat ban. What our diet isn't just food on our plates, it shapes everything from our jobs, trade, religious and cultural identities. Today, one of my mates already pointed this out, the global meat industry provides work for millions of people, and often in poor communities. So if we did that, if we ban meat, not only would we force these people to change their lifestyles, these people would also lose their jobs and won't be able to support their families anymore. And that's not right. Now, another point that we made is that a plant-based diet isn't accessible to everyone, and because either people won't be able to afford it, don't have, or their countries can't produce the right plant-based food to sustain their diets. And we believe that it's irresponsible to promote a ban without taking into consideration the needs of everyone. It's definitely important to search for ways to live more sustainably and limit the consumption of mass-produced meat. However, assuming that everyone has the same option to do so is unfortunately incorrect. Thank you.
As I'm the third speaker of the opposition team, and now that the constructive part of the debate is finished, we can welcome the reply for the opposition team.
Starting in 3, 2, 1. Good morning to everyone. I will introduce myself once again. I'm Italia Stroncone and I'm the last speaker of the Against House. In this debate we have seen two completely different words. The pro-house, which want to ban meat consumption, and the Against House, which does not. My burden of work is to highlight the point of clash we have seen during this debate. So the main point of clashes were the environmental impact, the freedom of choice, diseases and health problems, the replacement of meat with a plant-based diet, and I think that's all, and pollution. So, speaking about environmental impact, producing vegetables again is not pollution-free. Let's remember, as the first speaker of our house said, these chemical substances, for example, for instance, pesticides. We also argue that banning meat consumption is a real imposition and would therefore violate our freedom of choice. That, as we know, is a right to be guaranteed as also to every citizen, as the 13th article of the Italian Constitution also reminds us, saying personal freedom is inviolable. Freedom means the condition whereby an individual can decide to express himself and act without any constraints. But it is clear that the legal implementation of such an imposition would impose a lifestyle on the individual who wouldn't be free anymore and wouldn't have a choice anymore. The Pro House never questioned this our point of view, and therefore considered it right to limit the free will of others. In addition, they said that the meat consumption causes diseases, health problems, such as quoting their speech, cardiovascular diseases, diabetes. Such health implications are not the consequence of assuming meat nutrients. They are the consequence of a bad eating education. However, it's just an exaggeration in the consumption of meat that leads you to such implications and consequences. The replacement of meat with a plant-based diet wouldn't be possible because, for example, the protein provided by plant is not a substitute to the one provided by meat. For example, free legumes contain 3 times less protein than meat, and the protein are not good for our health nor easily absorbed by our body. Let's not forget that even the thought of finding a good replacement for animal meat being extremely high priced does not include the poor, and would economically ruin them even more, making their lifestyle impossible to bear. And the proposing house hasn't even talked about it nor replied to our statements about it. Quoting John Stuart Mill, over himself, over his own body and mind, the individual is sovereign. Therefore, it is morally wrong to impose such a stringent ban, attempting to be in control of others' minds and bodies. Thank you.
I thank the reply speaker for the opposition team, and I welcome the reply speaker for the opposition team to conclude the debate.
Well, this time has almost come to an end, and I'm grateful about this. And I am one of the work of the reply of the proposition team, and I'd like to main out the main point of clash about this debate. I'd like to focus about people with allergies that can't eat meat or vegetables, but I think that our house has demonstrated that there are many variety of vegetables and that can be eaten by everyone. Furthermore, an ethical problem that is linked to also meat industries and the poverty that you have mentioned. But we think that we have demonstrated that we can, those animals can be used to in other fields, such as milk production, eggs production. It's not necessary to kill them, to give money to someone only to work. And furthermore, another point of clash was the environmental, because our house have strongly demonstrated that plantation causes less dangers in our environment than carbon dioxide that are because of the killing and the consumption of living meat. Well, this debate focuses on the dilemma to eat or not to eat meat. And so, is meat healthy or not? there are emerged two different points of view. On the one hand, the opposition team supported a mild conciliatory view, according to which diets should contain also meat and vegetables, and our, that is the proposition team, in which we have explained that the only one thing to do is to completely ban meat because of the environmental, because of the health, and because of the social impacts. Well, our house is firmly convinced and has demonstrated that eating meat is not bad for our health, for the environment, and that eating meat is bad for our health, for environment, and for animal welfare. And in the light of these problems, banning the production and consumption of eating meat in all its form is for us the only way to keep healthy, to protect the environment, and to preserve animals' rights, because animals' rights to live, to be free. And for example, is first of all, if we completely ban our eating meat, it will create only some point of favor in ourselves, physical well-being, and consequently wellness means that our national healthcare system could be relieved and become more efficiently for everybody. So, the impact of meat on the environment is not truly. The impact of meat on the environment is not currently sustainable. It is very dangerous for us. So, the global meat industry is contributing to climate change by damaging ecosystems and releasing greenhouse gases. Let's just think that the resources going towards feeding the billions of animals used for food could be used to solve the problems of hunger, for example. We don't think that humans have, we consider that meat is completely dangerous, and we don't think that humans have the right to damage the environment and have the right to kill animals for food. So this is why I strongly believes that eating meat is not a good choice. That was all. Thank you for the attention.